Chapter 12, Fat-Soluble Vitamins, Screencast 2. This screencast is going to be focusing on vitamin A. Vitamin A quite often will be referred to as retinoids, and these are the actual biologically active form of vitamin A, and they are going to be referred to quite often as preformed vitamin A. It exists in three forms that can actually be interconverted. They are retinol, retinal, and retinoic acid. Now keep in mind, retinoic acid cannot be converted back to other forms. When we talk about retinoids, a big part of them is retinol esters, and this is actually how they're actually going to become retinol, and that is going to be a reversible process. So retinol can be converted back into retinol esters, and retinol can actually be converted into retinal. This is also reversible. Now, what is not reversible is going to be the conversion of retinal to retinoic acid. So once you have retinoic acid, it cannot be converted. Now, carotenoids, these are yellow-orange pigment that we find in fruits and vegetables. Many of them are provitamins, including alpha-carotene, beta-carotene, and beta-cryptothaxanin, which can be converted into vitamin A. Here we're looking at beta-carotene. The majority of that will be converted into retinal, although some will actually be converted into retinoic acid. Where we find retinoids are both basically liver, fish oils, fortified milk, and eggs. Notice these are all fatty items. Carotenoids are going to be found in dark green and yellow-orange vegetables and fruits. And the thing to remember here is beta-carotene has the greatest amount of provitamin A activity. 70% of North Americans, we actually get our vitamin A from animal sources, and this is not typical worldwide. Here we're basically looking at sources of vitamin A. Now keep in mind, on an exam, there is a table in the back of this chapter that we'll address in the final screencast that actually I will use as far as various good sources of lipid-soluble vitamins. So that is where I will go. So make sure you take a look at that table. Here we basically see that the greatest source or best source of vitamin A is beef liver. It actually has 600% of the RDA. If we look at a number of vegetables that are good sources, we're going to find sweet potato that actually is 225%. If we look at carrots, kale, broccoli, and spinach, they are also good sources of beta-carotene. So remember, they are going to be pre-sources or provitamin A for the most part, and will actually be converted to vitamin A within the body. The reason why we don't often see the colors in leafy greens is due to the chlorophyll, and that kind of hides the colors of the dark green. Now, as noted, you're not responsible for memorizing the RDA for vitamins, but I am going to talk about it just to make sure that it is covered. When we look at men, the RDA is 900 micrograms RAE, and that is retinol equivalent for men, 700 micrograms of retinol equivalent for women. The daily value, though, is 900 micrograms, and this is typically what we see on food panels. No DRI has been set for beta-carotene or any other provitamin A carotenoids. The average intake of men and women in North America typically meet the DRI guidelines. This is why we don't typically see it as something that is necessary on our food labels. Dietary preformed A, this is going to be found in retinol and retinol ester compounds. Retinol ester actually needs to be separated from retinol and fatty acid by enzymes so that it can be absorbed. 90% of retinol is absorbed within the small intestine by protein carriers. After absorption, retinol ester will be reformed and packaged into chylomicrons. Now, when we look at absorption, transport, storage, and the excretion of vitamin A, when we talk about our dietary carotenoids, remember they're going to be attached to proteins that must be removed by enzymes before they can be absorbed. 5 to 60% is actually absorbed by passive diffusion. Carotenoids are cleaved to form retinol or retinoic acid in the cells of our intestine. Retinol is converted into retinol, attaches to fatty acid to form retinal esters, and that will be actually packaged into a chylomicron. 90% of the body's vitamin A is found in the liver. Our liver stores have enough retinal ester to last several months. So this is one of the reasons why a vitamin A deficiency is so uncommon. Now, it will be released into the bloodstream from the liver as a retinoid, bound to retinol binding protein and transthyretin. The primary excretion of how we actually get rid of vitamin A is in our urine. Now, if we look at the key functions of vitamin A and retinoids, they are going to be growth, development, cell differentiation, vision, and immune function. Now, when we talk about growth and development, vitamin A is especially important in development of eyes, limbs, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, epithelial cells, and mucus-forming cells that are found in the lungs, trachea, skin, and the GI tract. What is really important to remember here is the lack of vitamin A during the early stages of pregnancy have been shown to result in birth defects and fetal mortality. Now here we're looking at the role of vitamin A in cell differentiation. So this is a process that will be happening within the nucleus and is very tied into gene expressions. So retinoids will bind to retinoid receptors that are found in our cell nuclei. And why this is important here is they regulate the formation of messenger RNA, and this eventually results in gene expression. And gene expression will direct cell differentiation. So this is how stem cells will develop into specialized cells. Now, it's also known that one of the most important functions associated with vitamin A is vision. Retinal is needed in the retina as it turns visual light into nerve signals in the brain. Our rods and cones are the sensory elements on the retina. Rods are those sensory elements that are responsible for translating objects into black and white images and detecting motion. Cones, on the other hand, are responsible for translating objects into color images. Keep in mind, we have significantly more rods than cones. Now here, this process in which how retinol or vitamin A is playing a role with respect to vision is pretty complicated. So let me introduce some of the terminology that we're going to have to be familiar with. We have a number of different versions that we have to keep in mind. We have 11-cis retinol. We're going to have all-trans retinol. And we also have rhodopsin. So the first thing that's going to happen, and this takes place within the rods, 11-cis retinol will bind to opsin to form rhodopsin. Now, if we look at what happens in the light, rhodopsin will absorb light. Now, what happens basically next, 11-cis retinol is converted to all-trans retinol in rhodopsin. Now, the all-trans retinol will separate from opsin, and opsin is what actually ends up triggering a cascade of changes that send a signal to the brain. Next, that all-trans retinol is enzymatically converted back to 11-cis retinol. So now opsin and 11-cis retinol are enzymatically combined, and this is how we actually regenerate rhodopsin. Now notice there's two different phases here, some occurring within the light, and those are known as bleaching events, and others are taking place within the dark. Now, to keep visual processes functioning, all of that all-trans retinol must be converted back to 11-cis retinol. Now, one of the issues here is if vitamin A pools are depleted, one of the biggest issues is a problem with the adaptation to dark. Hence, we have issues with night vision. Now, there also is a role associated with immune function, and an increase of infection is an early symptom of vitamin A deficiency. One of the things that vitamin A helps do is to maintain our epithelium. And remember, that is the barrier that's going to protect our body against the entry of pathogens. Now, another common use of vitamin A analogs is in dermatology. There are a number of analogs that are used to treat acne, psoriasis, damage from excess sun, and the exposure to ultraviolet light. It is important, though, to monitor the use of these analogs because there are serious side effects associated with them. Now, when we look at carotenoid functions, they can be converted once again in the body to form vitamin A. Beta-carotene may actually act as an antioxidant. It's also been known to decrease the risk of eye diseases such as macular degeneration, some cancers, and cardiovascular disease. Now, when we look at vitamin A deficiency diseases, deficiencies are relatively rare in North America, but they can be a major public health problem in developing countries. Worldwide, the deficiency of vitamin A is the leading cause of non-accidental blindness. Now, deficiencies will lead into changes within the eye. Those could be night blindness, conjunctival xerosis, which is an abnormal dryness of the conjunctiva, something known as Beto spots, keratomalacia, and xerophthalmia. Skin, we can have something known as follicular hyperkeratosis. And the other thing to remember here is growth impairment can be seen in infants and young children. Now, deficiency issues that we see within the eye are night blindness, conjunctival xerosis, abnormal dryness of the conjunctiva, Beto spots, keratomalacia, xerophthalmia, and with the skin, once again, follicular hyperkeratosis. As noted previously, growth impairment can be seen in infants and young children. Now, here we're actually looking at age-related macular degeneration, and so notice where the issue with vision is occurring. Okay, very much within in the middle. Here we actually see Beto spots, so these abnormal growths we can actually see here. Okay, and here we're basically looking at another issue as far as cloudiness occurring within the conjunctiva. And one thing known as hypervitaminosis, that is toxicity from long-term supplements, and this is only going to occur when we see uses 5 to 10 times beyond that of the RDA. The upper limit is 3,000 milligrams per day of retinol. There is no upper limit for carotenoid, and there are 3 different types of vitamin A toxicity. They're described as acute, chronic, and teratogenic. Here we can actually see examples. So if we look at deficiencies, notice with decreasing levels of deficiency, we can actually see death. Here we actually see normal functions, so normal growth and development, black, white, and color vision, cell differentiation, gene expression, and immunity. And notice with increasing levels of toxicity, death can be an issue. If we look at acute, that could be associated with GI upsets and nausea, headaches, dizziness, and issues with muscle coordination. Chronic, so we're progressing in toxicity, liver damage, the loss of hair, pain within bones and muscle, the loss of appetite, very dry skin and mucous membranes, bleeds, coma, and fractures. When we look at teratogenic, this is typically going to be fetal malformation and can potentially result in spontaneous abortion. And once again, increasing levels of vitamin A toxicity can be fatal.